Okay, so let's start modeling a vending machine or some sort of maybe ATM type machine, and trying to follow along as best you can, but you can put your own twist on it and you have liberty to make your own style. But it would be probably best to try and stick as close to what I do as possible so that we can do the trim sheets and they'll match up for this first attempt at doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to be modeling this on the same plane just next to this here so I can see my trim sheet and I can make some edits. Now the first thing I'm going to do is create my base of this, so I'm going to try and get the scales correct on this. So I'm just going to basically block it out. I'm going to start on the grid again, and I want my base for this model to be around about that big. And let's see, I want the keypad to be roughly about rib height, the bottom of the ribs. Maybe something like that. And I want, with this one, I think I want an outer sheath, so I'm actually going to make it a little bit skinnier here. So I'm just going to grab this outer face and holding X, just drag that down a little bit. Even though this is just a prop or a non-modular asset, I still like to work on the grid to a certain degree, because it does just help to align things. But it does eventually will start breaking out of that grid pattern. All right, so I definitely want the front of this to be kind of curved and have a little bit of silhouette breakup, so I just don't want this to be just a cube. So what I can do here is I'm going to put a cut in here, and I might bring that front edge down a little bit, and then I think I'll extrude this top bit up. I want some sort of machiny bit here. Maybe this is a projection panel for like some sort of hologram. This is kind of a cyberpunky thing after all. But I want it to be kind of basic and cheap. I don't want it to be really fancy and clean. Maybe some sort of ticket machine for a CD venue. Okay, so I'm not being really precise. I'm not measuring anything here. I am just kind of being free with what I do. I don't want too many restrictions on this. This is a little bit of concepting without a concept. It's concepting in 3D. And it's fine to do that, as long as you at least get some reference material up and get some ideas of what you want to do. Now, I would say if you're going to do a portfolio piece and you want to do a really, really nice portfolio piece, then spend a lot longer on your references and try to do some sort of concepts, even if it's just some silhouetting. You don't have to be a great artist just to quickly get some silhouettes down. This just allows you to throw away ideas before you invest too much time in the modeling process. So here what I'm going to do is I want an outer sheath on this, so I'm just going to select the outer polys on this, and I'm going to use these polys to create the next bit that I want. So often, rather than just grab a new primitive and drag it out, if I've got something that closely matches the next thing I want to make, I'll try to just duplicate it off that model. So with these faces selected, I'm going to shift and right click and go down to duplicate faces. And then before I click off this, I'm just going to pull them faces out a little bit using the blue one. It's a bit like extrude, and that'll just bring them faces out there a little bit. Now, when you bring this out, it will start warping it. As you can see along that bottom line there, we've gotten a warp because it's trying to wrap around the silhouette of this. So we will have to adjust that. But for now, I'm just going to bring this out just a little bit. In fact, almost nothing, just a tiny, tiny amount. Okay, and then I'm going to go to object mode, select that, and I'm just going to isolate that. Go to vertex, select those outer vertexes, and then I just want to bring them back to the plane. This is a great way to flattening things off, is with scale. So you select the vertexes you want, and then scale into the direction that you want to flatten it, and they'll flatten until they can't move anymore, and then you know that outer edge is flat. I'm going to make this symmetrical so it doesn't take quite as long to make, and it's probably faster to work on one half at a time. So what we can do, there's a few different things. You can activate symmetry, you can mirror it, you can duplicate an instance. Quite an easy way is just to mirror it with an instance. So if we just grab this and select all the edges down the middle, and then shift right click and go to connect tool, and then hit any key, W, Q, just to accept that. Then what we can do is also do the same to the outer sheath that we just made. If we connect them, and then just delete one half of it. Same with both objects. just need to make sure that the pivot is in the center, and we can do that by just snapping it to one of the vertexes. Okay. And then if we go to mesh and go down to mirror and go to the options box, we can tick off cut geometry, and we can change it from world to object, and we can change geometry type to instance, and X should do. Now if we mirror that, we get this instance version here. So if we come back to our main object, grab the vertex, we can see we'll get an update of that. And that'll work no matter which side we work on with this. So I'll just do the same for the outer sheath as well. Okay, so with this outer sheath, I need some thickness on it. So I'm going to select the faces and I'm going to extrude them outwards. Now, because we've deleted half of this, we're probably going to get a face where we don't want it. So we just extrude this first of all to the thickness that we want. And we just want to select that inner face and delete it. So it should have selected from both of them, and it has. Okay, and then back in wireframe, we can neaten this up. As you can see, extruding around the corner has made this odd shape here where it's pinched it right in the corner. What we can do is just grab that edge, go into our move, and if we just grab one direction, hold V, we can snap it to a vert that is in the position we want, and then again do it on the other direction, and now we have a nice flat surface there. So now we're getting somewhere with the shape of this. So I don't want these to be aligned, so I might raise this up a little bit. So I'm going to grab all the verts on the top, just pull that up, and then I could either move them forwards. Yeah, I think I'll do that kind of as like a bit of a privacy section, like a privacy booth. Yeah, I like that. You know, this is pretty simple. I'm just keeping the modeling really simple at this stage, and then I'll come back over and add the extra details to it once I'm happy with the overall shape. So I'm thinking that there is a screen here, maybe a tray there for receiving your tickets, and this top bit has a little bit of machinery, maybe a vent on it, and maybe some sort of place for a projection to come out of it there. So I need some rounded edges for this as well. I think we'll round some of these edges. But first of all, let's make a little screen for the front. Okay, so I want the screen separate and I want it curved as well. So I'm going to just grab a primitive here and draw it out just in front. Okay, and I'm going to bevel these edges as well. So I'm going to click one and double click the next one to select the ring. Shift right click, go to bevel, and I'm going to increase the segments on this and give it a nice round edge. And I think I'll also bevel the edges as well around the whole thing. Now, as you can see, because we've got this is like a giant n-gon, we can't just double click to select a ring because we've rounded these edges here and turn this into an n-gon. So two ways of selecting edges on something like this is you can come up to here, select the edge you want, then come up to here and go select and contiguous edges, which will select all the edges around there. Now this is good. I've actually put it on a quick button here, and most of the time this gets it right, but sometimes it doesn't. Another way of doing it, if you want to select all the edges around a face, if you just go to face mode, select the face you want and hit Control and F10, it'll select the edges around that face. So we can go face, face, Control, F10 and select those edges. Then I can Shift, right click and bevel, and then just put a small bevel on this. Now this is going to be more on the realistic side, so you want to keep bevels really small. You know, if it was something like Overwatch, it would be a bevel like that. If it's something like Cyberpunk, then you want more realistic bevels that you'd see in real life. So this is going to be a strip of metal running around the screen, and the screen is going to be edge to edge. So I just want a very, very small bevel, like you'd see maybe on an iPhone or something like that, but slightly bigger because this, of course, is a bigger machine. Next, I want to be able to curve the screen. So first of all, I'm just going to get rid of my n-gons and clean these faces up a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to just go to vertex mode and select these two and connect. Then I'm going to select the next two up and hit G to redo last tool, and the next two up and I'm going to do that front and back. And for the last few, I'm going to grab the cut tool and I'm just going to make cuts straight up. And this is so that I don't have too many edges getting too low. So if I was to cut this here and to this one here, you can see that the poly left in between is just really, really small and it's likely to cause errors. So what I'm going to do is grab the furthest one out there and cut it into the corresponding one at the top. And then to make sure that this is all at least polys, I'm just going to put one more cut in there, or you could do two just to make it tries. Okay, so once you've done that, it's a good idea to just do a merge on your vertexes, because that cut tool can sometimes be really imprecise and you can very accidentally put a vertex next to another one instead of actually cutting the vertex itself. So I like to select all my verts, shift right click, go to merge vertices, merge verts, and then just set this to a small amount. Make sure only the verts that I want to merge it together, so basically none of my bevels have collapsed, and I'm fine with that. I just make sure that any verts that are quite close are definitely merged together. Now I want to be able to bend this, so I need to add some geometry to be able to do that. So I'm going to select across here, shift right click and go to connect, and then when this green line comes up, I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button. I'm just going to drag to one side. And I'm just going to add enough edges that I can have a nice smooth curve without being able to really see the polys. So that should do. Then I'm just going to make sure the history is deleted and freeze transformations and center that pivot. Then I'm going to go to deform, go down to nonlinear deformer and select bend. And then in attribute editor, I'm going to turn the curvature of that bend up so I can see it working. And then we should automatically have the bend selected. So I'm going to go to the rotate tool. I'm going to hold J and just rotate that to 90 degrees. There we go. And then I'm going to set my bend to where I want it. So I don't want too much of a bend here. Now I want to put the screen in place here. But it might be the fact that we get it in place and then I don't like the curve and the bend of it. And if we collapse this and get rid of that bend, we won't be able to properly put another bend on it because it's already got a slight bend to it. So what we can do is select both of these and try and put them in place. But as you can see, it's going to move these in different directions. If we go to curve, it's going to curve these wrong. They're going to rotate, sorry, in the wrong direction. So what we need to do is make sure that we've got these set to world. And then I can rotate these down here. And now these will move at the same time. So I can put the screen in place and then adjust my curve to how I like it. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to select my object and delete the history and freeze transformations, so that curve's gone and it's nice and clean. And I'm also going to just align this with the center of this. Okay, so we've got our nice monitor up there. I'm just going to turn the edges off so I can see what that looks like. So I've got a nice hard chamfered edge around the edge of that. I like that. And I think I'll make this a little bit taller and a little bit skinnier. Now let's work on this outer sheath a little bit. I'm going to round the front edges of this, I think. So again, if we just select them and bevel, turn the segments up. Now we could match the curve of the screen, which it seems to have done straight away, or could make it a smaller bevel. I actually really like it matched to that screen. It's quite nice, that. So I'll put a couple more sections in there just to make sure it's nice. Got a really nice smooth curve to that. And now, should we put a bevel on the edge of here? Let's have a little look. No, I think I like that as a hard edge there. But I am going to slightly bevel the outer corner. Just by a touch, so we can have a smooth corner on there. Okay, and then just to make this a little bit more interesting at the top, I'm going to put an edge loop in here. And a second one, and I'm just going to pull out that front so that we get a little bit of a curve back upwards towards this. and that's gone softer, so I'm going to select these edges and just harden them edges, and you can go to mesh display, harden edge for that. Now because we're not baking anything, we're not doing a high poly and we're not baking anything in ZBrush, in Substance Painter, then our hard edges are how we define the shape and the feel of everything. So as you can see here, we've got these hard edges on the edge of the screen, but if we were to select the screen and soften it, then that's the kind of edge we'd get there as well, and that might be the kind of edge you're going for. And you can see this mimics what you would get if you were to make a high poly version of this and bake it down in Substance Painter. You would get this nice soft edge from your high poly onto your low poly, but then you would have to have a custom map for the entire thing. But by just using the edges and hardening, softening edges that you want to be hard and soft, you can get the same effect without needing a map for it. So that's kind of one of the beautiful things of using trim sheets combined with hard surface modeling and tiling textures and stuff. You can control the look of it without needing those custom high poly baked maps. So the top of this, I want to look a little bit less square and rigid. So I might bevel the outer edge. And I want to make this transition. So I think this bit is going to be like some sort of metal or painted metal. And I want the very tip of it to be some kind of chrome. So what I think I'll do is I'm going to put a divider in here. Now, because this is an N-gon again, we're not getting a proper division there. So what we can do is we go to edge mode and select these edges. And then we can shift right click and go to connect. And it still has our last selection of connection amounts. We just want to scroll that back down to 1. So again, middle mouse button and drag to the left. And then we can OK that by hitting any key. So I've just hit the movement key. And then I'm going to, with this edge selected, I'm just going to switch to scale. I'm going to scale this down so that we flatten that edge out. So now we've got a nice cross section there. And then I want to move this up a little bit. And then I'm going to select them top faces. Make sure they're selected. And I'm going to shift right click and go to extract faces. So in this instance, I'm not going to duplicate them because I don't want to leave anything behind. I just want to separate them. So we can go to extract here, and we can leave that as is because we don't want to scale it using this. If we try to scale this down here, as you can see, we get some warping of the mesh. So I'm just going to leave that as is. Now, one thing you'll have noticed is that the mirror has gone for this because that extract thing can't be mirrored properly. So it has actually removed our mirrored segment here. So we can just go ahead and remirror them. But first of all, we just need to make sure that our pivots are still correct. If we've moved the pivot, which I actually did, I select both of them when I centered the pivot. Then we can mirror this. So mesh, mirror. Then we've got that back, and we can do the same for the top one as well. Now I want to scale this down. Now scaling things with the mirror doesn't work properly, so I'm just going to delete the last one. I'm going to move this pivot to the center. And then move it to the center of the very front edge and the bottom edge as well. Now I can scale this down. It should scale down equally and keep its center position. So now you can see that gap all the way around. And then we can remirror this. Just freeze transformations, mesh, remirror. Now I can carry on working on this and have it update. And so for this piece here, so I want this to feel like it's kind of sat in here. So I want to make the front edge of this come down a little bit, but I don't want to put loops in around the whole model. I just want to kind of keep that detail to where I'm working. So I'm just going to select the two front edges here. I'm going to go to connect, and I'm going to put a couple of connections in there. Move them a bit closer. I'm going to select that front edge and move that down like that. I'm going to select the edges of this and move that down below. Now I want to close the top hole of this, but I don't want it just to intersect. I want it to look like there's at least a little hole in here. So we need to add some thickness to these top ones. So yeah, probably the best bet for this would be to duplicate these faces. Now again, we've lost our mirror here, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to select these two and isolate them. I'm going to select the top faces, and I'm going to move the pivot again to the front edge, keeping it in the center. So with the scale selected, I don't want to scale by the middle here because that'll scale it down also. Just want to scale it in the X and Z. So what we can do is just grab one of these little flat planes here, the bottom one, to just lock them two axes, and we can bring this down. Jump out of isolation so I can see how close that's getting. Okay. And then with just the inside selected, we can go to Mesh Display in reverse, and then combine these two together, and then we can start bridging across these edges. And we can bridge multiple at once by select them all and go to bridge. So the only thing I want to change here is this angle on these. So I'm just going to grab that edge, and again holding V, I'm going to snap it to the front one like that. And I want to soften these as well, so I'm going to bevel them. And I'll put an edge around here as well to give me something to snap some of these off to. And you don't have to, but it's always worthwhile to just make sure that edges around things are just nice and straight. It'll make your topology much nicer to look at, and also if you're going to use one of these edges as a seam for your UVs or trim sheets, makes it much more easier if it's nice and straight. So then I'm going to take this vertex here and using Target Weld Tool. Now when you select Target Weld Tool, you can go up here and select it there, but you can also go Shift right click, merge vertexes and Target Weld Tool. It's well good to get used to these marking menus, because once they become habit, it just speeds your flow up. So once you select Target Weld Tool, just do a little drag in the background just to make sure you've not got any other vertex selected, because if you do have a vertex selected that you didn't realize, and then you go to merge, like say this one over here, it'll actually grab the one from behind, and if you're working on the front of a model, you won't notice it until it's way too late to just undo. So always get used to just dragging off, make sure you've got nothing else selected, and then you can start merging whatever it is that you want to merge. So then vertexes might be merged off to the corner eventually, but for now I'm going to leave them just in case I want to break any of these panels up later on. So I want to make sure that this face here is the same thickness as the rest. So I'm just going to grab that face there, bring that in, just eyeball that. Okay, so now we've got that done there, I want to bevel the edges of this to make it even more round, so it looks even better compared to, just to add that juxtaposition against the more rigid metal down here. I think this might be like a thin aluminium chrome or something like that. So I'm going to select the two outer faces and go Control F10 again, and then deselect the inner faces, and then do a nice big bevel on this, increase these segments like that, and then I'm going to select the outer vertexes here and just move them close to that edge so we can't see too much of a gap between these. Now I probably would add extra bevels to the edges of these things and around here, but for the purpose of this demonstration we're going to try and get those bevels visually from the normal map from our trim sheet instead. But if you're doing your nice, say, high poly hero asset, then you'll want to add more bevels into places like this and try and derive details from the bevels, because it will overall make your item look higher quality. Again, I'm going to go to this and mirror it, and I think we're getting somewhere now. This is starting to look quite nice. Some smaller details on there, some nice shapes. You know, it's not the most interesting of things, but I think it's starting to have potential. So next I want to put where the tickets will come out. So I think I'm just going to put a couple of slices in here. Again, I'm going to make sure those edges are nice and flat. Right, I think I can join up one of them edges there now as well. So I'm going to grab that and bring it down here. Just flatten that out and make sure it's lined up with that. So I can bring that out a little bit. And all I'm trying to do is just get a think an area that will be made out of a separate material and then a hole at the front here. So let's extrude this, but I don't want to extrude it out, I just want to offset it. And scale it down a little bit. And then I can delete this face and then snap that face holding V to that vertex up there so that they push together. And then I'm going to extrude this inwards with the hole for the vending slot. And we can delete those inner faces. And then I'm going to grab this bottom face here and duplicate it. Again, we'll lose our mirroring. And then we just need to select the duplicated piece, center the pivot on that, delete the history and freeze transformations, and I'm just going to rotate that up. And this will be the little lip to catch the goods. So select that and extrude, give it some thickness. Maybe bevel that edge as well so it doesn't catch anybody's fingers and cut them. We don't want to get sued now, do we? And delete that inner face as well because that's where it will be duplicated from. Okay, now I want to start thinking a little bit about the material breakup on this. Okay, so in the next video we're going to do a basic colour pass on this and start breaking it down into a nice colour combination that we can then put onto our trim sheet.